Hey guys, welcome to the 4 to 9 podcast. I'm 9,
I'm for.
And I'm two.
and today for this week's episode, we'll be talking about a very heavy debate question between our two hosts right here, 4 and 2. And today's debate question is going to be, should everyone learn how to code? Now, we all know, if you guys don't know, we're all kind of heavily experienced in the coding field and programming.
We're software engineers.
We're software engineers.
You can just come out and say it.
We're software engineers. We've programmed. It is our not only our job but our hobbies, and we enjoy it.
It's in our blood.
It's in our blood in this case, and we all thoroughly enjoyed. We have our quarrels, we have our issues, but at the end of the day, we'll still do it again and again. But the question is, we on first hand have seen many of our colleagues, our friends, and even family members sort of have an interest in coding and in programming in general. And some of them do it because they want to follow the same career path. Others do it because they just want to kind of like dabble in the hobby, right? So we thought about this question for a while, and we decided to spin it for you guys as a debate question this week. And pretty much it comes down to, should every person, an average person, for example, a student or such, should learn at least the basics of coding, right? So, Four, would you like to tell us your view on that question?
Well, before Four goes in and does anything, right? This isn't despite his debate point, but can you define for us so that we're just clear, all on the same page here? What are the basics?
Okay, so that's fair. The basics would be, I would say, understand like simple. I would say basic scripting would be kind of ideal. I'll put that in like Python, maybe a little shell script, understand variables and conditionals and loops, and maybe I guess you can even plug in like very basic classes.
So would you say like just logic?
Yeah. I would say
I
logic.
think for me, someone who I would consider knowing the basics would be able to like open up Python and like read data from a CSV, manipulate it, and then write it to a CSV. Like I think that would require pretty much all of the basics. Like if you can pretty much read write from a file like that, I would say you know basic programming, and like in a lot of situations that's probably enough. But
interesting, because I had a different view of the basics, right?
Yeah, what do you think?
I was viewing the basics more as someone who has knowledge of discrete mathematics, right?
Yeah.
So and or exclusive or union intersection. That was what I considered, like, I would say the basics, right?
I mean, you can group that up in logic if you think about it.
Exactly. So it's essentially logic.
I say my point of view, right, is more if the programming mindset, right? That I think, which I think incorporates a little bit of both of your views. It's kind of like the logic, right? But also they can pick up. They have like
The
one
practicality.
Yeah, they can pick up one language that they're pretty strong. May that be Python or Java, but it's usually one, and they're pretty good, and they can kind of like do a basic like app with it, like very basic. That's what I mean as like the basic.
If you can't apply the things you know and like actually write code, I mean, like, right, think about this. Our topic here is, should everyone learn how to code, right? We're not saying should everyone learn logic, should everyone understand discrete math. It's should everyone learn how to code, right? So specifically, unless you can write useful code, like I wouldn't consider you someone that codes, right? Like that's based on what at least our topic is here.
That's fair. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for my assumption purposes. But Four, go ahead and give us your view, just basic overview right now of should everyone learn to code.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, programming and technology and all of these different facets of, computer science are becoming, more and more ingrained in people's everyday lives. I know a lot of you guys watched our last episode on IoT and smart home electronics and whatnot. We talked a lot about that and how, every day people are interacting with these devices. And, I mean, a lot of people have no idea how these devices work, or the backbone that keeps them running, or, how devices are interacting, or, what powers them, the brains of those operations. And, I mean, I think if people understood, like, a little bit of the basics of, how code works and how it runs and how to write it, and how to make a computer do what they want, I think that it would really assist them in their day-to-day lives of just understanding the things around them, right? I mean, maybe not everyone is interested in understanding them. Some people might be okay with just using it, calling tech support if it breaks, right? Googling stuff when they, need to set it up or whatever, or looking through the manual. But just having that little bit of, expertise in how the devices work, I mean, I think that they're a big help in just, using them and interacting with them in your day-to-day life. And, you know, for example, let's say that I ask Alexa a question, right? And just me being able to know that, like, okay, I asked her a question, it ran a function, right? Like, maybe you could, like, think about, okay, that's why it's taking so long to get back to me. Or, just knowing that, hey, when I'm trying to make a request, right? Let's say you're using a Python request. Python requests can time out, right? Knowing that when you ask Alexa something and you get like a communication or a network error, bam, you've seen that in code before. You've encountered that same error, right? They just explain some of these issues you might be having without you having to kind of do all this troubleshooting and whatnot. Um, so I mean, I think that just in your day to day life, having knowledge on the devices that you're using and how they work and how they're built can be really kind of convenient and beneficial. But I mean, outside of just convenience in knowing about the things around you, I think almost any job today can benefit from some degree of computer science knowledge and programming knowledge, right? I mean, think about it. Even if you're like an accountant now, Excel can do a lot of stuff for you, right? But I mean, if you're able to, run reporting by yourself with a Python script, or, maybe write,
Or VBA scripts if
yeah,
you're using Excel.
correct, or even VBA scripts, you're right, even within Excel, right? There's so much more power that you can do. You need a function, and Excel doesn't have that function built in. Guess what? Bam, build it in VBA, or build it in Python and let the Python script, open up the spreadsheet you're working with, right? And I mean, it's just so convenient to be able to do things like that. And I mean, there's a lot of people that will do like, oh, let me do a VLOOKUP or a pivot table or this or that, and like, some of these things can just be easily written and automated, and then like you don't have to worry about doing all this stuff manually, right? Generating these reports manually week after week. Guess what? You get the same report every week. You need to compile it into a different form, or you need to generate something. Write a script for it. Hit one button, and that's it. Your report is built week after week, right? Think about all the time that can be saved by just scripting some of these like tasks away in the workplace. And then outside of even like getting rid of like menial tasks like that, maybe there's issues. Maybe you want to like have an algorithm or a script that will detect bad data or detect errors or just look for certain things, right? You can do that, and maybe someone no longer has to scroll through those things manually to find the errors you're looking for, right? You can save a lot of time this way. So I just think everyone, or at least a lot of people, especially in office situations, could really benefit from having some degree of basic programming knowledge in terms of being able to be more effective at their jobs. And I don't want to put myself out of a job, but I mean, I think that basic knowledge would go a long way in helping everybody. And I don't think personally that people having basic knowledge in programming would really affect your software engineering careers, because at the end of the day, your software engineers are going to have a much deeper knowledge and understanding of things like algorithms and data structures and time complexity and building things in the cloud and architecture, and there's just so much more stuff that goes into programming. And I'm not recommending that everyone learns those more in-depth features, but just for quick automation, quick scripting, and just kind of making everyone's life better, I think that it would really be kind of nice. It would also make our lives better as developers, right? Because maybe our business units and clients and whatnot would understand what we're doing a little bit better.
What would you say to someone who would say that you're, let's say, like an accountant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That having them kind of like, because I would assume that at least for that sort of line of work, the younger generation kind of pick this up more.
Yeah.
And then the older generation kind of struggle with, as we see, the older generation tends to have a more difficult adjustment to, especially technology. And now telling them the program could be difficult. What would you say to someone who's like, this can kind of like push away an older generation of like a workforce by kind of solely incorporating the need of program?
I don't necessarily know that that's too big of an issue, I think that knowing how to have a little bit of coding expertise it would be attractive, no doubt, for young people coming into the workforce. But I think anyone can learn it. Even if you're a little bit older and might have more trouble or don't have quite the same amount of time. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you will have other skills and experience that will kind of differentiate you between those young people. So, I mean, you've been working on systems for 20 or 30 years. No one's going to understand that like you do, right? No one is going to be able to come in, and just because he knows how to code doesn't mean that he can, work with all of that content you've been working on for decades. So, I think in terms of just you worrying about being out of a job because younger students or people out of college might have, more skill set in terms of their technical expertise. I think that your raw experience as someone that's been in the field for so long and has so much experience kind of just outweighs whatever little bit of programming knowledge we're talking about here. Like I said, I'm not recommending everyone become a software engineer. I'm recommending, or I think it would be cool to see at least more people just understand how code works and maybe be able to write a little bit of it.
Fair enough. So, two,
Mm-hmm.
what's your views on this debate?
4 brings up a lot of great points here, right? 4 brings up a lot of great points for, professionals and for people who are just interested in automating their lives in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through like the examples he gave, accounting reports, or through, just day-to-day life tasks, right?
Yeah.
But I think, right, in regards to that automation process, I think we've come a long way into having people not even have to interface with code, but to write their own automation scripts for them through like the Shortcuts app on your iPhone, through the Amazon Alexa app if you have an Amazon Alexa, through, I don't know if you guys have Macs, there was this thing called Automator, right? Which automates a bunch of your frameworks and like Windows and everything for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
All without touching code, right? And I bring this up because automation, I think, is key for the future. I think that's where majority of our value is driven as engineers, is into automating tasks, automating jobs, automating the future, right? As much as we can. But even day to day, you still need the human touch and the human element to it, which is why it's very difficult. But in terms of should everyone learn to code, I personally don't think so, right? I'm in the boat of just people not necessarily learning how to code. I think coding would be the next step, right? Above what I'm about to say is just general computer education knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. People assume, based on the generations and the technology that people are born into now, right, that another 23-year-old just like me knows how to use a computer, knows how to use a phone, knows how to use a tablet, knows how to do any of this, right?
Yeah.
You'd be very surprised about the people I've met. And you guys know, and you guys have met when we've tutored our very, very basic CSE class. I don't know if you guys would remember CSE 005, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys don't even know how to use a computer, right? But they're skilled in other regards, such as accounting or music or whatever it may be. But I think general computer knowledge and computer education is the way forward right now, right? Just because if you can't use Google, right? If you don't have the skills to use Google, you don't have the skills to install your own operating system or to troubleshoot basic technical problems yourself, right? Without the help of like Genius Bar or Best Buy's Geek Squad and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Then I don't even see the point of you coding, because for you to not even understand the computer or understand how that whole system is in place, that's my main issue. And I think majority of people we see, and I'm working with a couple of people now too, who not on my day-to-day job, but outside, who are my friends, right? Who like, these guys are geniuses. One's going to be a lawyer, one's going to be a doctor, right? But they need help on basic tasks on their computers, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I see the future really going is not in the sense of should everyone learn to code. I think there needs to be a sense of basic computer education that needs to be taught first.
Computer literacy, you're basically.
Computer literacy. I think that's the best term out there, right? I think putting computer literacy first before should everyone learn to code should be the key thing. Because let's be real, coding is great and all, but with all the advancements in technologies that we as engineers have made, it's, to be honest, for a bunch of tasks that people would need it really day to day, you really just that's done for you. You want to build a website? Go to what's it called, Wix or something, right? You wanna automate some stuff on your computer? Hey, Automator's sitting right there. Or you could download like some things from the internet, right? You want to write a bot that could help you score the next 30-80, right? Selenium framework. Go look it up, right? And just download it and use it, right? So it's like there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's automation and that could be just done for you that I don't think people would really need to learn how to code for that. But I think computer literacy would need to be the key to understand that you have Automator, you have Selenium, you have the Amazon Alexa app or the Shortcuts app or any of this stuff, right? I think to understand computer literacy is the key here before getting to should everyone learn how to code. But that's just my view on it.
So just to be clear, too, you're advocating not necessarily for the ability to everyone learn how to program, but even lower level, or if everyone just know how to use a computer properly and the
Correct.
knowledge from using that. Sure, I mean that makes sense. I can totally see your viewpoint on that. I think a really good example you keep bringing up is that we see a lot of intelligent people in many different fields: medical, financial,
Music.
music, right? And they're really intelligent, right? They have amazing skill sets. They do some things that I cannot even possibly dream of, and yet they can't do simple tasks on their computer, like how to do a recurring email, how to properly set up what's it called, email, calendar events and stuff like that.
You'd
Or
be
even
surprised how many
properly,
people don't know the difference between 2CC and BCC on an email.
yeah, or even just properly Googling stuff. I think that's one of the big things you can learn as a programmer. But realistically, you learn that even more through, I guess, computer literacy. So I can see your advocation for that. But I think it just come then we're gonna have to just come down to the idea of computer literacy is we I think we can argue that computer literacy is something that should be taught more and should be improved over.
Oh yeah.
But I think the question comes down to like Forrest said, should we take it a step further and go to that coding route or stop it there? So I think this is where we're going to keep moving forward from this, right? Essentially, will people agree with two? Like we all agree, computer literacy. Let's ramp it up, right? Let's teach it to everyone. But or we have Forrest point. Should we keep going? Teach everyone how to code, program. Teach them skill sets from that.
I do want to point out, right? Like I like that you brought up things like Automator and the new shortcuts features on iPhone with the new operating systems, right? I think that the success of all of these other features will kind of show you exactly how many people might be interested in learning to code, but just, haven't really been exposed to it, right? Because I would argue if you understand how like those shortcuts features work and you understand how Automator works and you can use it well and properly to do and automate tasks for you, like you're already almost there, right? Like think about this.
I agree.
It's, that's, hey, if this criteria is met, do this. Like that's like the fundamental of anything anything you ever write in code. It's, hey, when this happens, do this. Like, bam, that is any piece of automation code you'll ever write, right?
I agree.
So if you're able to properly understand that feature right there, and like a lot of people have been able to understand those things. I mean, we can see just based off of the success of it, like, all of these new shortcut features that are on the new operating systems, everyone has been raving about them, right? Like every time I'm scrolling through social media, it's like, oh, hey, use this cool shortcut, or like I made this cool shortcut, or someone did this, someone did that, right? There's loads and loads of people using it and building it and, kind of just like dispersing what they did to everybody else. So, I mean, I think judging by the success of these automation tools, I think even though I agree with you in that a lot of people they don't have the computer literacy skills to learn how to code. And I didn't want to cut you off, but I totally understood what you meant when you said, if you don't know how to use Google and you can't troubleshoot like an operating system installation, you will have a very hard time coding, right? Because if you can't troubleshoot that error, how are you going to troubleshoot an error when, you get a Stack Overflow or, index out of bounds exceptions, right? I mean, your troubleshooting skills are basic. And outside of computer literacy by itself, I think troubleshooting skills are another thing that are really lacking in a lot of people. So I can see what you mean when you say a lot of that. However, I do think that for those people who have the potential and have those like basic foundations in computing and troubleshooting and just understand how to use technology, I think that those people, they should really have the opportunity, or at least more of an opportunity, or maybe be pushed more towards at least learning basic actual writing of code. And I mean, I think people who are interested in those things and are good at those things are more likely to even maybe pursue careers in software engineering and development to begin with. So I think if they just get a little bit more exposure or maybe a little bit more push towards the
Like a
field,
push, yeah.
yeah, I think that might kind of help everybody.
And to your point, right? Like, I agree with exactly what you said there, right? But the point I want to emphasize here, and this is not necessarily your view on it, or it might be your view on it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way people are equating coding now, they're equating coding to a basic skill of like writing or like math,
Yeah.
right? Or in some cases, depending on the country you're in, English.
Yep.
Right? They're equating it to that. And to be 100% honest with you, I don't equate it to that. I really don't equate coding to me writing or reading or math. I really don't.
Honestly, I kind of do. I feel like, I don't know, it's just at this point in my life, like after, we're in our 20s, early 20s, right? So when I've been coding now since end of middle school, maybe 8th or ninth grade, like that's when I started doing like scratch programming and stuff or whatever. Like, I mean, I've spent, think about this, 8th grade, how old was I? 13, 14, right? I mean, like 40% of my life I've spent learning about code and writing code or reading code. Like, it's just so second nature to me now. Like, I don't know, like I feel like it's almost like those other tasks, at least to me, for someone that's been interested in this stuff for, a big portion of my life.
And I think that was the key right there, what you just said, that one key word of interest, right?
Yep.
I think that's the biggest thing. I think writing, math, reading, these are life skills. I think you can't be a person in the world without knowing reading, writing, or math, right?
Yep.
Period. End of story there. But I think you could still be a person and a functioning member of society, right? If you don't know some science, if you don't know physics, whatever, if you don't know programming, whatever, right? Like being a productive, functional member of society, I think is perfectly fine. And I equate the bare bones basics of that to just be reading, writing, math.
Yeah.
Right? I don't equate programming with that.
And
right?
Well, if you think about it, I kind of consider programming, it's almost like a cross just between writing and math. Like, it really is. You're just writing math with English terms. Like, that's it. Like,
Basically.
it's almost like a hybrid of mathematics and English. And, if you want to think about it like this in terms of like a school subject, right? I think that programming could possibly be treated even as something like a foreign language, right? So, for example, you take Spanish, you take Spanish, French, Italian, Mandarin, Japanese, whatever, right? Do you need those to survive? No, you don't need those, especially in the United States at least. Foreign languages are not
exactly.
required,
I was going to say, depending on your location.
right?
Yeah.
Those are not required by any means. You can, know only English. Some people don't even read English or write English and can still get through their life just fine, right? But in particular, your foreign languages like that, they're not totally required for being able to just be a functioning member of society and get a job and do things, right? But however, schools still require them at least to a certain degree, right? You have to at least be exposed to it. You have to maybe understand it, right? And I think maybe equating programming to something like that, or even if you give the option, right? Be like, hey, maybe try programming instead of this or that class, right? And I'm not saying to get rid of foreign language, but, maybe you give it an optional or treat programming as something similar where, we want to at least expose you to it because it's so important going forward.
I agree. And I think that's a very valid point you bring up, exposure, right? I think everyone should be exposed, right? I think it should be on the level of like, how we have like history lessons or science lessons and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yep.
Like, we don't go into the deep Newtonian physics of atoms and quarks and stuff like that in a physics class, right?
Yep.
No, we go into momentum and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the same essential, I think, needs to be brought up in computer science, is that exposure, Now, that's a different question entirely, right? Should everyone be exposed to programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I would say yes. I think it should be offered as, now you can debate whether it should be required or an elective.
Mm-hmm.
I would personally say it should be an elective,
Yep.
right? And I would put it as an elective above a required class of computer literacy,
Yep.
right? That's the way I personally would structure it, right? I think in at least the US, right? I know at least in 90% of US high schools, right? You could forget about middle schools, elementary schools, that's still like bare bones basic stuff, right? But like, I would say in high school, right? I would say that about 90% of high schools, and 9, you can attest to this yourself, right?
Yeah.
Going into high school and not having a computer science class, right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
And in my high school, I was fortunate enough to have a computer science class, but I didn't take it, right? It was not required. I didn't have to do anything about it. I decided to take a math class instead, right?
Yep.
Which is fine. But I think the key there is that exposure, I think, should be given. I think everyone at some point during their educational career, their base education career from K to 12, should be exposed to a computer literacy class.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I was exposed to this a few times, I would say, right?
Yep.
I remember a couple of times in elementary school, we had computer class, and like we played like type to learn and stuff like that. I don't know if you
Yep.
guys ever used type to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like we had like type to learn, and we played these like fun games, like learning how to type and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a pathetic typer, but still, right?
Yeah. No, I
And
know
then-
that when I was in middle school, we had a computer education class, and
Same.
it was very basic, right? They taught you how to do things like touch typing, and it was at this point where, you know, I was a big video game player for pretty much my whole life at that point, but and I already knew how to type pretty fast, but you know, understanding how to touch type and like, you know, even though technically right now I'm probably not touch typing, even though, you know, I can type well over 100 words per minute right now.
I can't.
It gave me like that foundation where, okay, sometimes I'm sitting and I'm typing and I get lost or I lose my keys or whatever, right? One of the things that they taught me in that class that I still keep with me today is the little tick marks on the F and the J key, right?
Yes.
They help you recenter, right? So that class, you know, even though I'm not using the exact touch typing technique that they said, and I kind of just have a muscle memory of where all the keys are at this point, if I ever lose my track, I look for those little tabs, right? And that class kind of taught me that. So that was one little skill I picked up that I still use to this day from that class. And then outside
Well, I got
of
my
that,
next. Go
outside
ahead.
of that, you know, that was the class where I got introduced to Scratch. And, you know, Scratch is really, really powerful for teaching people like that like logic, the predicate logic that we were talking about earlier, right? Where you can kind of define events, make triggers. You know, when you click this button, you know, he moves 100 pixels to the right on the x-axis, right? It's all visual. It's drag and drop. I think you can write code for it, but for the most part, you're just dragging and dropping code. It's like you're making a video game, but with Wix or something, right? So it's that class gave me a lot of exposure to these things, and you know, I can't remember everything. Honestly, it was a long time ago, but those were the two big things I took out of it: were typing literacy, typing skills, and basic introduction to, you know, drag and drop programming, I guess, through Scratch. And I mean, that kind of like fueled my drive going forward. Because I mean, at that point in my life, I'm pretty sure I wanted to be a doctor when I was in middle school, or you know, a surgeon or something.
God bless you.
And I mean,
Nope.
that exposed me more to computing than I had ever been before in my life, right? And then that exposure, I took that into high school. And luckily, my high school actually offered a fair bit of CS classes, right? So we had a very basic web design class, a very basic game design class, which was, it used, I think it used this software called Game Maker, which was, it's almost like Scratch, but more advanced, right? And we were a little bit of code now. It was maybe half and half, but still nothing too crazy. And then there was a very basic Java class for computer science and programming. And honestly, looking back, it wasn't all that great of a class, but at least it was there, right? And then as I was graduating and leaving, they were actually working on implementing an AP computer science class, right? So, I mean, the actual curriculum for this stuff, at least in my old school, it was pretty robust, all things considered, right? Like, that was a fair bit of classes in a couple of different genres. So, I mean, I was pretty happy that I got to be exposed to all of those different things. And, I mean, it's very possible that all of that different exposure is the reason why I decided to follow the career path I did. So, I mean, what do you guys think?
I think that's a great point, right? And I want to give Nine some room to give his opinion because I feel like he's moderating here when he should be getting involved in a discussion as another engineer, right? But I think that's a lot of key points you brought up, right? And all I'm going to say is that I just know what my next prank is going to be when I swap out your mechanical keyboard for a European mechanical keyboard of the same brand. So good luck learning how to type with that thing. But Nine, what were you going to say?
So I think that one thing we should really bring off from what you guys said, right, is the exposure versus like requirement. Like earlier when Ford was talking about how he explained how everyone should learn code and stuff like that, how it would be good in industries like accounting and stuff like that. It kind of sounds like it's a secondary skill set that should almost be slowly implemented. Because it offers so much benefits, right? But as Tu mentioned, and as you also partly agree, that's not the same thing as also increasing exposure. Increasing exposure can, lead to it more jobs incorporating coding, right? But you can have increasing exposure without the other. But if you have the other, it kind of messes all up. What I'm basically saying is that if he follows four paths of increasing exposure, right, having it apply to schools and the education system, right? We have to. It's a fine line from basically allowing these kids to learn coding to like requiring it for a job that didn't require it before. And I think we all agree right now that creating exposure for this, kind of like what you said for like a secondary language, is pretty beneficial, right?
Yep.
And it just comes down to them if they want to apply it, if they want to learn it. That's all down to them. But you have to get really careful when you start saying, at least in my opinion, that it should be required in not now more jobs than it did before. You're slowly transforming the jobs that didn't require coding expertise now to now requiring them expertise, which is now additional skill set they have to learn.
I want to let Tu talk, but before we do that, let me just refine my point. I don't think I was ever recommending that it be a requirement or that every job now require coding. I was just pointing out that all of those jobs would definitely benefit from having some basic programming knowledge and experience. They're an undoubtful benefit, but I don't think they should be a requirement.
Sure, but if everyone learns how to do it, then it's slowly going to become a requirement one way or the other. If you think about it, because it becomes so beneficial that doing the alternative is no longer like an optimal path for the job. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of like having it's like sort of like, think about back in the 80s or the 90s when there wasn't computers.
Yeah.
Right? And then jobs started getting computers. And like Tu said, computer literacy started to grow throughout the 2000s. And now you see jobs that require you to have computer literacy at some minimum to perform, like secretary or like teaching. Like these things didn't require
admin positions, which is what you're referring to, like support positions.
Yeah. Like I'm
which
saying,
never required it before. That was pen and paper.
Exactly. So like, I mean, one can argue that maybe it's time for coding to be implemented, but like I said, it's a very fine line to increasing exposure of programming to slowly having to push it into new fields.
Well, here's the thing: if it gets to a point where jobs are now requiring it for fields that didn't previously require it, I mean, that would require a majority of people moving into that field, or at least previously working in that field, to have shown them that it's beneficial, right? So there's already been a transition at this point, right? It's not going to be required right away. People are going to come in with those skill sets, and they need to show those workplaces or force those changes to happen, right? So, I mean, if it happens naturally like that, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, companies aren't just saying, "Hey, guess what? Even though you never had programming experience to begin with, now we're requiring it." Like, obviously, that's a bad thing, but naturally evolving a work like a kind of area of expertise or a job or career, I don't see that as a bad thing. If people are going to become more skilled and be able to do more, I mean, I see that only as a pure positive. Like I said, I can see it as being reckless and dangerous if, all of a sudden, tomorrow some workplace says, "Hey, all new hires, they need to know how to program." But if it's naturally occurring and people are just learning and getting more skilled, I mean, I think that's just growth.
100%, I agree. It's just the problem is that we've seen businesses gone like the reckless and rush kind of nature when it comes to these things. I'm not saying all of them do, and I'm not saying it's a guarantee it's going to happen, but there's definitely that possibility, right? So that's why when I say everyone should learn how to code, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very dangerous compared to saying increased exposure.
And keep in mind though, even if they do go that reckless route, most of the people who would be originally filling those positions will no longer be qualified. Right, so now they're going to be requiring a higher degree worker. They're going to need to get more. It's a more skilled person, and they're going to have to pay for that. So, I mean,
let me also just put it this way. Like, I think the main reason that we're talking about even this question, right?
Yeah.
Is the reason that this question has been so driven lately, right? Is because, for lack of a better terms, people assume that software engineers get paid a shit ton of money for just sitting at the computer and writing some code.
Yep.
Right? That's what I want to emphasize here as the base assumption, right? And let me tell you that, yes, you may have those engineers who are sitting at their desk writing code all day or designing or doing everything, right? But you have that in other fields too, right? With architecture and
accounting.
Music, accounting, finance. You have these in so many other fields as well. But the point I want to emphasize here is that it all comes down to what I think Forrest said the best, and that's one of his key words I'm still sticking on here: interest, right? I think personally, I'm in that whole boat of like, do what you love and like enjoy doing what you love, and then it won't feel like a job, and the money will always come, right? I understand in certain circumstances, that's more idealistic than other circumstances, right? But at the same time, I don't think you could tell everyone, okay, go learn to code and you're going to make a shit ton of money, because you're not, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hate to burst your bubble, but if you're learning how to code to make a shit ton of money, right, you may accomplish that goal, right? But will you be happy at the end?
You probably get burned out super quick.
Like, and, you may also assume that, like, coding, okay, cool, it's a 9-to-5 job. I sit at the computer to get this done. Hell no, right? It may take you from 9 to 5 to solve 3 lines of code. But between 2 a.m., when that thing hits you, you're going to log back into your computer. And from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., you're just going to keep writing code because you got a sudden burst of inspiration, right? And so that really only comes from passion, from knowledge, from, just loving what you do, right? I could probably say the same thing about finance people or accounting people who can't solve this one weird accounting issue. And all of a sudden at 3 a.m. they figure it out and they hop onto their accounting software and get it done, right? I think it's really a matter of preference and interest. And now, but to Forrest's point earlier, do I think people should be exposed to it? Absolutely. And there's not a doubt in my mind that I think everyone should be exposed to code, right?
So how would you do it? How would you implement it?
I think, I alluded to this earlier, but I would put it in the education systems, right? At least I know the way the United States education systems are structured. I can't speak for our international viewers here, right? So please take my word with a grain of salt. But the way I would really structure it is I would require between a K-12, in the K-12 education, I would require computer literacy, right? And then above computer literacy, I would provide electives for computer programming, right? If they want to go and involve into code. But
How early are we talking about that? You're saying
computer
K-12?
literacy?
Yeah.
I honestly think computer literacy. I think there should be a computer literacy class. I think if not every year, at least at the bare minimum, every 2 years in elementary school and middle school, right? In high school, I think you should have 1 full year of a dedicated computer literacy class, right? And then computer programming should come as an elective for those who are interested. Because you could also have those students, like, I'm sure some of us will in some subjects be like, God damn, do I really got to take another year of this thing? Right?
Yep.
So put them out of their misery, call it a day, let them go. Right? I'm not going to say anything. But those who are interested, I would let them go and advance into computer programming. And then those who are super interested, I would put them further towards, like, we have an AP computer science course offered in the United States, right? Across all the United States, right? It's called AP computer science, and they teach it in Java, right? It's the basic equivalent to what we took as our intro to programming class in college, right?
Yep.
and I would push the strongest students and the most interested students towards that, right? And that's how I would ideally structure it, right? But there is a caveat I would like to point out here, right? Being the idealistic engineer that I am, right? I would also put some basic math requirements there too. Now, you could tie this in with the computer science course and teach like discrete mathematics and computer programming at the same time. Or you may require it as a separate course, right? Before they could even take that class.
I just see one big problem with this, right? Like, the moment that you add more math to it, I feel like you've lost 85% of your high school population.
You see, I hung out with nerds, right? I would take it more. But like, that's just me. But see, now in computer programming, if you were to teach discrete, so then I think to keep that 85% of population, right? To your point 4, I think you should tie in discrete mathematics with the computer science class or computer programming class, whatever it is, right? And I don't mean, and people, when you hear math, people freak out, right? Like algebra, goddamn, right? Like, or trig, right? I don't know why so many people had trouble with trig. I really don't get it. But like, what I would say is that teach it within the computer programming class.
Yeah, I agree.
But have it not be, I guess, I see where you're coming from all the conversations I have with you in the past. Don't make it bland, right?
Yep.
There's literal application that you can show in a computer programming class. Like, hey, here's some Boolean logic of true and false is equal to false, right?
Yep.
Am I getting that right? Yeah. True and false is equal to false, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then show that in the code. If true or false is, boom, done. Got your answer.
And I think I sent you guys this GIF a while back. Remember the video? Remember it was the two water fountains and it was used to explain truth. Where it was like if they're both on and they reach the center, it's true, right? Like even things like that, just just visual representations, especially for younger students who might not be quite as interested in this stuff as people in college who are kind of definitely interested in it. They're paying for it now.
Yeah, if you're taking computer science and you're not interested in college, you got to seriously evaluate what the hell you're doing because you're really paying for that. Like,
he just wanted to dabble. He just wanted to dabble in it.
Yeah.
Dabble on your own time. Don't dabble on $3,000 of credit.
Dabble with a little credit. That's what you want. That's how you get a dangerous thrill to it.
Yeah, but I think that term, right? The moment you associate it with, oh my God, math, it's like such a huge turnoff for a lot of people. And I mean, I
math is turn off
to learn basic programming, right? Like you don't need to know advanced calculus, right? Like you're not doing elliptical curve, freaking cryptography stuff. It's maybe you need to know how to add some stuff or do basic algebra and understand like truth tables. But so long as you can do that and you're capable of that, I think that you can learn basic programming skills, right? Like you don't really need more than that to be a basic programmer.
Now, would you? I know two said like. Basically, have requirement courses for computer literacy and then electives for computer programming. Would you change the system to make computer programming an actual class and not an elective?
So, like I said before, I think that you could really consider and compare your foreign languages with your programming languages, right? To me, their use case and viability outside of school seem very similar, right? Right, it's very useful to know a foreign language. If you know Spanish, that is no doubt useful, right?
I mean, to an extent, like you're not gonna see me talking to you in C in real life, right?
Well, of course,
like that'd
not,
be pretty
right?
funny. That'd be really funny.
That would be funny. Well, I mean, sometimes we do it. We're nerds, but anyway, outside of that, the use, like I said, I just think the use cases are very similar in that they assist you in life, but they're not required for life. And they give you a competitive advantage on any career you go for, right? So think about it. If you take Spanish, it's very useful in that, oh, hey, maybe you want to travel, right? Or maybe you're in a Spanish restaurant and you can, read the menu better. Or let's say you're going for a job that deals with a lot of international clients, or you're in a heavily, Spanish area. It's going to definitely help you. Right? No doubt that's going to give you a competitive advantage over people who don't know those things. Similarly, you're going for a job knowing how to code will give you a competitive advantage over those people who don't know how to code, right? Understanding computer science will help you once again in your day-to-day life. You'll have a better chance of troubleshooting your problems. You'll probably be more literate with all types of technology, right? I mean, I would argue knowing and being very, very good at programming and computer literacy will impact your life more on a daily basis than having a second foreign language at a high school level.
So would you say that it should be kind of a second language is kind of a requirement to have like one? Would you say a computer programming, maybe even a very basic one?
I don't necessarily know, because I still agree with what Tu was saying before, in that some people just aren't up for it, or aren't ideal candidates for taking higher level programming courses. But maybe there's some way for them to have an optional requirement where you can sub things out, right? Maybe you can sub your foreign language requirement for a computer programming requirement, or maybe you can sub
it out for math.
One of your math requirements, exactly, for your
like your senior year math. Instead of taking a pre-calc course, like in your senior year math, instead of taking a pre-calc course, take a programming course, right?
Yep. And let's think about this for a second too, right? Like, if you're going to take pre-calc and you're going to need that credit for pre-calc, odds are you're going into a STEM field anyway, so you might be able to either just test out of it, or
you'll probably come across programming anyway later. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're pretty interchangeable. A lot of your STEM degrees, whether it be engineering, any form of engineering now, any form of software, computer science, any cybersecurity, right? Like
any medical, believe it or not, too.
Yeah, I mean, in our entry level classes, I mean, I'm sure you guys saw how diverse the majors are in like your basic programming course. And then similarly in your like Calc 1 and even Calc 2, there are a lot of different majors and career paths that all require the mathematics. And I mean, I would say most of your STEM degrees are going to require at least one basic programming class and pre-calc, right? So, I mean, you're just really just transitioning when you're taking it.
I mean, yeah, that's fair, 100%. But,
Nine, what are your thoughts? We haven't heard much about your thoughts on all of this.
You guys are hitting pretty much all the points, especially with 2 saying it should be more about computer literacy, should be a main focus, while 4 is kind of dabbling the whole, allow the curious kids to really pursue it further. I think, with most things, it's got to be a really fair balance between the two. I think we can all unanimously agree that computer literacy is the foundation where all this comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And increasing computer literacy across all the school education system is just a big plus, no matter what field you end up going through, because you're all going to use it. And with technology improving and the growth of technology and how important and impactful it is in our lives, it's kind of important to include that as a form of education. I mean, even now, I always get amazed how young kids learn, like, computing stuff. If you think about it, I remember when I was like 12 and stuff, I barely knew how to I knew how to surf the web, but I didn't know how to do like gaming very well. It was still kind of new to me. My brother is very young and he can pick it up like it's nothing. There's babies, toddlers that can navigate an iPad like it's second nature to them.
Interesting point, though.
Yeah, exactly.
But what have they been all exposed to here? Touchscreens.
Yeah.
That's, I think, an interesting point you brought up, too. And I think this is where a lot of computer illiteracy and computer misconception comes from, is that because you have the ability to use a touchscreen and tap and tap and tap to get what you want, right?
Yeah.
Does not necessarily mean you know how to do the same thing on a computer.
Well, 100%. Well, you gotta also remember that these mobile devices, specifically what we're talking about here, are programmed by expert teams of UI and UX designers that literally made it so easy a child can do it, literally. So, and that's not going to be applicable to every single software you come across. They're just, that sort of priority isn't a big concern. Like when you do like a taxing software or like even a normal web browser, right? Sure, they kind of want to make it easy for someone to navigate through and get what they need to get done, of course, right? They're not going to make it a maze. But for certain things, you just can't simplify them that well. You can't simplify tap the balloon to make a pop game even more simplified.
Mm-hmm.
So like these kids are gonna be exposed to technology one way or another. It's better for the education system to really show the potential that this computer literacy can go, and also nurture that learning in a way where it can be beneficial for them to grow into, like Forrest said earlier, into hopefully actual interest in the computer field. And it's up to them to then pursue it if you want to keep going on.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you guys think would actually be considered computer literacy, right? So, what would that class contain? What would be in there? What do you guys think?
I think it depends when you're talking about tier list, like beginner, intermediate, and senior.
Go
right?
into a tier list. Start with the beginning. Go in beginner, intermediate, and
Beginner,
expert.
it would just be a bunch of games, honestly. I'm talking about like elementary, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about elementary, a bunch of games, cool math games, for all the OGs out there that know what I'm talking about. That's where this all started out. Let's be fair, these kids have a very short attention span.
Whoever remembers Fun Brain, you are the man.
These kids have a very short attention span, right?
Yep.
It's not ideal to teach them, oh, here's the advanced tool settings in Google. Like it's not gonna stick, right? It's just not gonna work out. I'm not saying we shouldn't teach them things useful. Of course, we can start them very easy with like, oh, this is how you look up Google, this is how you do images,
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep.
Stuff like that. But definitely be littered with like, eye-catching games and stuff like that. Help. And just like games that can even teach even further computer literacy skills later on that can help them. Like just like what's the normal UI structure of like a computer? Like this is the file storage. It's always in the bottom left usually. This little icon means file. Like really, scroll bar. Like just teach them in a really nurturing and kind of like slowly introducing the elements.
Yep.
Right. Then we get to intermediate. Right. Intermediate is where we,
Well, before you get into intermediate, by this point, what do you assume that they already know?
By this point, I assume we know the basics, blocks of what a computer is on a modern OS has, right?
Okay.
Where things are, I would say. Like they know most applications are on the bottom, right? They know that which one opens up, their internet, like what our browsers are. Right, which ones is their browser?
Mm-hmm.
They know how to search things through their OS, right? Like just press on the search button, and just basic like typing skills, like how to navigate the keyboard very well, and sort of like tab goes to the next field, like very simple things that should make their lives easier, with navigating. With intermediate, I would say possibly more into the realms of sort of like advanced Google searching, how to search for like, advanced like actual useful things like education articles, stuff like that.
And
Maybe
I just want to
even
point out that is the most underrated skill you can have.
Yeah.
Absolutely the most underrated skill you can have, because if you are really good at Google searching, you could pretty much have any skill you want. Like
let me tell you,
the world is your oyster.
And let me tell you this from professional people I've spoken with. And I'm talking about professional attorneys, right? Who do like patent law.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He sits on Google Patents, bro, and pulls up everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, seriously, it's Google that he's using as an attorney. It's mind-boggling to you, right? Or let's take another example. I read this article actually today about image copywriting, right? How are they getting the information of who stole their images and everything? Google Advanced Image Search.
Of course.
It's just basic, this researching skills. It's not programming. It's literally just plugging an image into Google and hitting search.
It's even simpler than that, right? Like I can't tell you the amount of times that like, some family member or friend or whatever, their phone isn't working, right? Or their app won't load or something, and like they hand me their phone and I'm like, oh, did you try to Google it? And they're like, yeah, I couldn't find anything. And I look at the search bar and it's like, phone won't work. What do I do? And like, that's the search they had. And I'm like, that's not going to get you what you want, right? You need to understand what to ask Google to get the answers you want. And I think that could probably be a really, really, really good stepping point for a intermediate computer literacy class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 100% agree. That's I honestly think, like we talked about, advanced Googling or even like really knowledgeable Google search is pretty much the gateway to like any field. You think about it, right? Doesn't matter what your profession or your what's it called career goes to, accounting, law, doctoring, and especially programming. You all benefit from knowing how to utilize the skills and tools of Google and web browsers and the internet in general to your full advantage. And that pretty much would be the intimate. It would be pretty much understanding what the internet can offer you, right? That would be the main goal of that realm. How do I Google stuff? What sort of like, things that I say, like tips that we advanced internet users have learned, right? Over the years, we just teach them immediately, like stuff like how to see a certain link, instead of like some sort of like advertisement, And also another important thing I want to point out, and this important thing, this is also where I start introducing slowly privacy, concerns for privacy. I know we talked about this in one of our previous podcasts. Check that out. But this is also where I was starting introducing privacy stuff, kind of slowly like understanding them. Like if you search things here, the internet will know exactly what you're looking up. There's a catalog.
My only issue I'm thinking right now is I feel like we've now just talked about advanced Google searching and like privacy and stuff, and like we haven't even introduced a topic like how to use Microsoft Word, like Microsoft.
That was actually my next. That was actually my next thing. That was actually my next thing to be like. It would be like very basic Microsoft Word. It would be like how to use like documents, like how to open up a document.
Right, because I think that those are. I think those are arguably.
That's basic.
You think that's basic? I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like I feel like there's maybe multiple levels of basic, but you just can't fit everything in a single class, right? And for a lot of your students that might be in those early classes, just using the computer and knowing how to type and like hand-eye coordination with the mouse is, especially we're talking about young elementary school students, like those things might take a while to master, right? I mean, I know a lot of young kids and my cousins and whatnot, and like they have a hard time with the hand-eye coordination of the mouse and the keyboard and typing. And
but intermediate would be in the middle school range.
Yeah. But you see, that's an interesting point you bring up, because I see computer literacy classes more in the sense of like, more deeper dives into this whole computer stuff and everything. But the way I see really, English, math, science, whatever class you're taking in elementary, middle, and high school, they already incorporate all these computer skills, right? Like in elementary school, I could tell you honestly, I wasn't writing my book reports, I was typing them, right? Yeah. So it was like
but they don't teach you them. They kind of like enforce it. But
I had a computer. But in my case, I had a computer class, right, where we learned about where we learned about typing and stuff like that, right?
But I didn't have that class.
The way that they did it for me, typically we would go to a computer lab, like, okay, we're typing our stuff up now, right? Because this was, when I was in elementary school, it was probably like 2006 or something, 2004.
Yeah.
It was years ago. I feel kind of old talking about those years anyway, but
you are old. Welcome.
getting there, at least getting there. But regardless of when it was, we'd be in the computer lab, and at that point, I think not everyone had a computer at home still at that point. It was still where computing was relatively new, right? Anyway, we'd end up with one of the librarians or the computer lab technician, right, or whoever was there, and they'd be like, okay, all right, everyone watch, and then they'd show you all how to type and do things, and like, all right, go ahead, do it, just do it, and like, if you have questions, you ask. Like, it wasn't really a class per se. They kind of gave you like a quick overview of how to do things, but it was just kind of play and figure out as you go. And I mean, luckily I was always pretty handy with it, so I never really had any issues, but I know some people struggled with it, so.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's this is why I like I said, the beginning phase will be a period of like 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. Intermediate will be more of a period of 3 years, and then you have the advanced, or I think what two is really thinking about when you talk about computer literacy, right?
Yep.
It's really deep dives,
troubleshooting,
really
fixing
troubleshooting, understanding and reading errors,
software installation,
OS exposure,
permission. What's it called? Permissions on how to properly display and like accept permission. And this is where you also get the deep dives of privacy, right?
Yep.
Really, when you start narrowing down exactly, even like basic, even if you want to dumb it down to the basic levels, what cookies are involved in and how that can invoke your privacy, smart tips to these kids, password managers, keep your password to at least a 15 character limit, demonstrate the strengths of having random characters, all these simple things I think we all picked up, right, in our college courses and through our own self-interest, should be taught to these kids. And even if, like, let's say half or 70% of them pretty much don't care, like, don't care about having strong passwords. They don't care about their privacy. They don't care what's it called, how to advance Google search, right? It's exposed to them. Just like in math, it was exposed to them. It's up to them to take that steps further
Yeah.
and use the skills that they were exposed to and they were taught to their full advantage. Doesn't
Yep.
mean everyone's gonna do it. Doesn't mean we're gonna solve the problem overnight, especially with the whole privacy thing. That's not how it happens. But we started a movement. We planted the seeds for these kids, and eventually, and just like with math, right? Some things will stick more than they even
Mhm.
think themselves, and that's how it all starts.
And some of these features, right? Like just thinking about this, for example, like that deep dive into like Google research and whatnot. I mean, that's something that
Yeah.
could be split up over a couple years of
Oh,
other
100%.
classes, right? Like think about this. I don't even necessarily know if you need to put that in its own specific class, right? You do research all the time, right? So for example, you have English, you write papers, right? You do research on those papers and you write it. You have to get bibliographies, right? You have to think about like
MLA formats.
yeah. Think about like your history and social studies classes also. Another thing, you're doing research for these papers, right? You have to find sources and cite things. And, I feel like that right then, when you're doing these research papers, that could be a really good opportunity for these topics to be gone over and taught. And the only reason I say that is because we kind of like covered a lot of stuff, and there's a lot to do. But I mean, school is already a very full day, right? Like students already have packed schedules, so I'm just struggling to see where all of these pieces could be fit into that school day that's already full.
That's
What?
Yeah, and
fair.
to my point earlier too, right? Like this needs to be incorporated not just in a dedicated computer literacy class, but taught continuously throughout other classes like
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way I was
English,
thinking of it,
math, and everything.
the way I was thinking it was that those classes you're talking about, English, research, the reason
Yep.
I said to still have a standalone literacy class is because then they're sort of, those classes are basically, if you think about it, homework.
Yep.
Because you wouldn't really have homework for these classes, right? If you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
you can for certain assignments, sort of like look up a research paper or like read this article on privacy and like write these 5 simple
Yep.
questions, answer these 5. But like realistically, it'll be a class that really enforce like a big heavy work policy, like homework policy, because like you
Mm-hmm.
said already, it's already full school day. I'm not trying to kill these kids.
Yep.
But that's where the other classes come in. That's where research, English, math even comes in, because they're enforced through other classes
Yep.
naturally.
You're right.
And that's why I still think that it should be implemented as a standalone class. Have just introduce, like we talk about this. This is just all about exposing to them, showing them the steps, and then let them see themselves naturally
Yeah.
apply them
Yep. No, very,
over a course.
very, very, very true. So, I mean, I think we made some really good progress today in this discussion. I mean, I think we're pretty much left on the point that everyone should get exposed. Everyone should receive computer literacy classes. And
But should everyone learn how to code?
and those people who are interested in taking it further should have the option. They should always have the option to do it if they want to.
Agreed.
That at a very bare minimum, I think we've at least met at that common ground.
100%. I think we all agree.
I mean, what do you guys think? All of our viewers out there, let us know what you think on maybe DM us on Instagram, tweet at us, leave some comments on the videos and whatnot. We're interested to see where you guys stand on this debate. But on that note, we are out of time for today. So we hope you all enjoyed listening to us on this week's episode of Should Everyone Learn to Code, which I guess turned into a just kind of open discussion on more computing education. And we will see you all on our next TechCast Friday. Have a great start of your week, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.